and funny plays and concerts. So they have a mailing list out there. You can sign up for it, and you can see some things that are a little bit different than we're doing tonight. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
My name is, well, that's a long story. A story which took 20 years to live. And it's taken dozens of interviews with cops and lawyers and countless conversations with therapists and counselors and advocates and 3 full days of testimony on the witness stand to tell. Some of the worst parts of the story played out in front of people. Friends, family members, co-workers, strangers. People who turned a blind eye, or a deaf ear, or a cold heart, maybe. People who had problems of their own to deal with, who didn't want to get involved in someone else's family problem. A private problem which should never rear its ugly head, where nice people might have it forced into their consciousness and be made to feel, what? Confused? Horrified? Annoyed? Conflicted about what to do or what not to do. Why didn't you just leave? A lot of them have asked. A few out loud, but most just the way they looked at me. Or didn't look at me. Experts say the average domestic violence victim tries to leave 7 times before the situation resolves itself with either a successful attempt or death. Mine was the 6th try. I guess I'm just a fast learner, huh? Nowadays, they all say how proud they are of me, how proud they are of all 3 of us. But where were they then, when I didn't even have my own name?
My name is Jean. I was her sister until I passed away a few years ago. But I want to help her tell you this story, since I wasn't of much help when I was still alive. She was 2 years older, and we were really close, except for when we hated each other. Sisters, you know. I don't know how she hooked up with an idiot like that. We weren't raised that way. Our father never even lifted his voice at our mother or us kids, much less his hand. He was much too busy working 3 jobs, 6 days a week. He was head cook for 2 restaurants and a school janitor, all so that Mom could stay at home and raise us kids the right way. My sister, she loved to dance and cruise Story and King in a really cool '78 Regal. She worked a real job at the church since she was 16 to buy that car. She graduated from high school and she started junior college. But then Pop died. She took it real hard. All of us did, especially since our brother was real sick at the time. You know, when she was younger, she had a few boyfriends, just like the rest of us. And she didn't take any crap from those boys, but they were all pretty respectful of her, you know? Well, except for the one that knocked her up and then left. I think that had something to do with her getting so messed up with that guy that was in prison. He was a cellmate, a friend of a friend. Who needs friends like that, you know? Well, after they got married, he moved her way, way out into the sticks. And I hardly got to see her anymore. Well, I didn't like the guy, so I didn't mind at the time. But then I got in my car accident, and she was finally able to get away from him and come and stay and take care of me and help me in my last days. And that was the first I had heard about all this stuff.
fell in love with a prison convict serving 3 years for a crime I didn't commit. I still really don't know. You see, he convinced me that he took the rap because the guy he said really committed the crime had a wife and children, and he was just doing a solid for a homie. And yeah, I was young and alone and pregnant. I was just vulnerable, I guess. That's what they do, you know. They go after the vulnerable ones. You've seen those wildlife TV shows where the lion manages to find the lamest zebra in a herd of thousands and zeroes in and stalks and devours it. That was us. I was his lame zebra. Well, what I do know is that his letters made me feel beautiful and sexy and loved and special. Special enough to visit him in prison once a month, to San Quentin or Tehachapi or Susanville, making the long haul from San Jose with a baby. Special enough to believe his grandiose ideas of what he was going to do when he got out. Him, a 9th grade dropout with no skills other than dealing small amounts of cocaine and talking real big. And tattooing. He sure could do that. Oh yeah, and making bombs and setting them off in cars.
My name is, well, I'm not going to tell you what it is now, because I changed it a long time ago to hide from him, and I really don't give a fuck what happened after that. He knew me as Brianna, so let's go with that. I hadn't thought about him in years. No, that's not true. I still think about him on my birthday every year, because for the longest time, he somehow found out my address and would send me a card, until I gave him a slip, again. But then a couple of years ago, a detective came wandering through my old neighborhood, where I just happened to be visiting. And he asked me if I happen to know someone who used to live around here named Brianna. I said, why? What's this about? And he said it was about him. I said, who'd he kill? Because it wouldn't have surprised me. He almost killed me. I often prayed he would. When a 14-year-old girl gets a crush on a smooth-talking older guy, a lot of bad things happen. Like being locked away in his house for over 3 years. That's right, 3 years. A virtual dungeon where a whole lot of things happened that I didn't ever want to talk or think about ever again. Until I told him on the eve of my 18th birthday that if he let me out, I would go home and I would get my stuff and get the money from my piggy bank and we could get legally married. Yeah, it was total bullshit. But he wasn't the brightest crayon in the box, you know? So we went to my house and I ran in the front door and out the back. And my parents hid me far, far away from him. For months he stalked my parents' house, looking for me, begging for me, professing his love for me. He even tried to kill himself to prove how much he loved me. And finally, he blew up my parents' car in their driveway just to prove their eternal love. He was kind of funny that way. He did a few years in prison for the bomb. I tried to tell the cops back then what he had done to me, but they didn't want to listen or believe it. I told the detective that I didn't care what happened between him and her. I was not going to testify about what he did to me to help her case. You see, I talked to her on the phone once. I told her all about him. She obviously didn't listen, so fuck her. She made her bed. I did tell that detective maybe he should look for Sandra. Maybe she would testify, if she's still alive.
We got married while he was still in the joint, and when he got out, he raised my older daughter as his own. Yeah, right. The violence started right away when he didn't like my friends, or the way I talked to them, or the way I talked to him, or the way I dressed or wore my hair. But afterwards, he always apologized and promised it would never happen again. And sometimes there were flowers and nice dinners. I figured he was just getting used to life on the outside, and the bruises healed quickly. The physical ones, anyway. I ignored the red flags when he moved us out to the boondocks to a little ranch where no one, especially my friends and family, could come visit us and disturb our idyllic life together. And I ignored the red flags when the apologies and promises and flowers and dinners turned into him just blaming me for everything. Now, I worked in a church the whole time, and for a while, he had a job too, selling thermostats for an old prison cellie's business. He came home on weekends after working out of town for the week. 2 days of hell, and then 5 days of waiting for hell to return. Which was worse in a way. The waiting, I mean. And after a while, he couldn't hold a job. He said it was because I was so beautiful and hot and sexy, and he loved me so much, he was afraid someone might try and take me away from him. He was so nervous and anxious when we were apart, he just couldn't hold a job.
My name is Kim, and I used to work with her at the church. In the beginning, she was so happy and carefree. I watched her girls grow up, and I love them to death. But after a while, things seemed to get, I don't know, kind of tense. She was always having to call him the second she arrived at work, and then the last second before she left. And then he kept calling her all throughout the day. It was obsessive, I guess. And looking back, I should have made something out of it, but she always said everything was fine. She never complained or really confided in me, and we were friends, so I don't know. I just wish she had said something. Well, how could I help her if she didn't say anything? When I met him, a few times actually before the real craziness set in, he seemed okay, kind of charming, in a rough and tumble way. Well, except for the way he liked to talk about their love life in real explicit terms. And the way he talked about their farm animals mating was really creepy. Well, I mean, I was raised on a farm, so I know about all that, but... And once, in a restaurant, in front of his own little girls, he started describing how his pigs were... Oh, it was just so... I don't know. And then her little bumps and bruises started getting worse and more frequent. They both said it was because she was drinking a lot and falling down, and that's what was causing the bruising, but I didn't believe it. Well, I guess but she never said anything, so I don't know. What could I have done?
He became suspicious when I was suddenly no longer keen on satisfying his carnal desires 3 or 4 times a day. Every single day. You see, his love for me was so great that he just needed to know all the time how much I loved him. He needed to make sure that I loved him more than I had loved any other man in my life. He quizzed me endlessly, excruciatingly about all my boyfriends even before I met him. Every romantic word spoken, every kiss stolen, every awkward teenage grope, every lustful adult moment, the exact who, what, when, where, and how. How long did it last? How big was he? Oh, yeah. Especially that. No, not bigger than you. In what position? Exactly. And of course, I couldn't remember every single detail, so if I contradicted myself on a tiny point the 10th time I had to tell it, I paid the price for my bad memory.
My name is Maggie, although all they ever called me was juror number 8. When they were telling me during voir dire, jury selection, what this case was about, I didn't really believe it. I swore to hear the evidence and make my decision based on that. But it was so unreal. It was totally unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Now, I've been divorced before. He was a nice, but misguided guy. There was never any violence. This kind of psychotic control. My first thought, when they were giving us a vague outline of the trial, was why didn't she just leave him? If it was really like this, why didn't she just leave? During the trial, she talked about the notebooks. But it wasn't until we saw them displayed on a screen, page by page by page by page. 3 full handwritten notebooks with so many intimate details from before he even met her. And then there were his notes about the notebooks and his detailed flowcharts, and I don't know what else. The photos of her, very disturbing. And the lie detector tests, 3 of them, with so many explicit questions. I just kept wondering myself, how could she possibly do these things? How could he possibly get her to do these things? Why didn't she just leave him? Why didn't she just leave? I know. During the trial, she explained how she tried to leave many times. And the domestic violence expert on the prosecution explained the kind of control abusers have. Okay, I get that. But why the hell did she tell him about the affair?
I don't know why I agreed to the polygraphs. I had already written out the details for him 3 times. Each time he took the notebook away from me and made me write it out again, and then again. God, it was so hard to remember every detail, but I tried. I really tried. But with each inconsistency, I paid the price for my imperfect memory. Well, first you said the 3rd time with Chewy was in the living room of his house. Then it was the back seat of Camaro. Then the front seat. Stick shifter automatic. Huh? Huh? Lying bitch. How could I believe anything you say? Then he insisted on the lie detector tests. He spent weeks formulating the questions, and we went to a lot of private detectives until he found one disreputable enough to ask me all of his long, rambling, obscene questions. When I didn't completely fail the exam, he accused me of giving sexual favors to the examiner. So he beat me. Well, it was my fault, you understand. The violence. You see, I had either failed certain questions I should have passed or passed certain questions I should have failed. I don't really know which. You see, that was his game. And then came the final test. He was going to have the examiner ask me if I'd ever cheated on him. Well, somehow that had never been in the mix before. I mean, he was so certain I hadn't. Why would I settle for second best? But he just needed to make sure to deal with his increasing anxiety. So I agreed. Agreed being a relative term because one would always eventually agree. I figured answering falsely and being found out a liar would somehow be worse than telling the truth. You see, I did have an affair for 6 years with a gentle, loving man who wanted my love and my body, but didn't insist on taking my soul with it. So, I admitted it. I think I was wrong. That's when things got really bad. And then my older daughter moved out and joined the army. Because Iraq or Afghanistan, was much safer than here.
My name is, well, that's a really long story. Not quite as long as my mom's, but my story has lasted all of my life. See, when I was born, I was given the name Danielle, but I never knew my biological father, so instead, he raised me, and he made me believe that I was his. And he changed my name, but not legally, just, well, it's really complicated, but anyway, now I am Danielle again. And I finally met my real dad a couple of years ago, and we're good now. Really good. Anyway, they say that time heals everything. That's such a tired cliche. See, in my experience, it deadens the pain a little, but it also creates really inconvenient moments when memories are triggered. It's funny, I forget what I did yesterday, but I can remember everything he did all those years ago. Because of him, I grew up believing that I was unlovable and stupid and useless. And I knew from the beginning that what he had with my mom was not normal. I mean, my nights were haunted by her screaming and the thumping noises of the objects he used to hit her with. Sometimes I would take the beatings for her, but it was scary that I was glad to do it and that it brought him some sort of pleasure. I think that I was 12 years old when he told me that he would kill me and bury me in the mountains and that nobody would miss me. I can still remember the look of darkness in his eyes when he said that. Somehow I managed to find someone just like him. I mean, narcissistic, abusive, and full of shit. The first time my boyfriend in the Army hit me, I was enraged. I fought back with everything I had. Finally, I realized that when I was fighting back, I was actually fighting him. I've lived with all this pain for so long, I don't know how to let it all go. But I will. I have to. And I pray that God takes mercy on his soul, but if he doesn't, I'm okay with that too. My hope is that time will eventually free my soul from this darkness and from him.
After he found out about the affair, he came to work with me every day. Every single day. He sat with me in my office and watched me work. He followed me around. He timed my bathroom breaks. He helped explain away my increasing number of bumps and bruises and scrapes to my coworkers. You see, I was just clumsy, and I drank a lot, so I fell down a lot, which was true. How else could I deal with him except with the mind and body numbing booze? He told them that I got scraped up by working on the ranch, which was also true. I did do almost all the work now as penance for my sins. Feed the livestock, muck out their stable, mend the barbed wire fence, stack the hay bales. Oh, he even helped me write the email to my coworkers explaining to them that I would no longer be known by my nickname, the name they all knew me by, Annie, because Annie was a whore, and Annie was dead now. Instead, I would now be known by my given name or my new nickname, Whore. He even helped explain away the disturbing tattoos I was getting.
My name is Christian. I didn't know them really well because I had just started working with the thrift shop at the church a year or so before all hell broke loose. I remember when she sent out the email about changing her name and about having the affair. And that was when he started coming to the church every day. But he didn't work there. He was just hanging around her office. When she answered the phone sometimes, she would tell random callers, I mean parishioners and people from other parishes and vendors, that she was a whore. Weird. But the weirdest thing of all were the tattoos. Now, he was a tattoo artist, a good one, he said, and she already had a lot of tattoos because she talked about them, but she always kept them covered up at work. I mean, she was always real professional. That is, until the adulterous tattoo appeared. Right in the middle of her forehead. She tried to comb her hair over it, but he always made her comb it back. And then, the one on her neck right after that. Wow! I mean, who has whore tattooed on their neck? With little flowers all around it. She must have wanted them, because that's what he said. He told me, people, other people, everyone. You know, he would say, look what she made me do, because she felt so guilty. I had to do it. She begged me to. Sometimes he would even have tears in his eyes. And she would either nod in agreement or say nothing. Except, this is my cross to bear. So maybe she did want. I don't know. You ever hear that French phrase, folie à deux? Yeah. I think maybe both of them were crazy.
I thought the tattoos would be the end of it. I was praying they would because I was sure this camel's back couldn't hold any more straw. For months, he made constant threats that I would either let him do those final 2 tattoos or he would drug me and tie me down and do even worse ones. So I agreed. The relative peace after the second tattoo lasted for a while, but it still wasn't enough to ease his pain. His pain. There was still more I had to do to earn his forgiveness. Now, he wanted me to have my body altered because he didn't want it to be the same body that I had shared with the other man. We went to a dentist and had some teeth removed. Teeth he had cracked with his fist because I had kissed the other man and now my mouth wasn't the same. Then he took me to a tattoo parlor where they did body piercings and he had them put 3 studs in my tongue. But he was also going to have them split my tongue like a serpent because he said I was a cold-hearted snake. But I managed to put him off on that. Then, because I had shared another part of my body, he wanted me to have plastic surgery down there. But I managed to put him off on that too. He did, however, insist on a tummy tuck. Well, I mean, what 40-year-old woman with 2 kids who drinks a lot couldn't use a little help? But even that was on his terms.
My name is Kelly, and I'm a nurse practitioner who works in a plastic surgery practice. Been doing it for 17 years. A lot of the cases blend into each other. Some are more memorable. But this one particular case really stood out. It was a common abdominoplasty, you know, a tummy tuck. And they both came in for her pre-op physical exam. It's not all that common for the husband to come in, but not unheard of either. When they do come, we always ask the husband to stay in a waiting room, and they always do, no problem. Except this one guy. He demanded to be present for the entire exam. I figured he was just super jealous or suspicious or something, so I explained to him that doctor was a woman, and there were going to be no men in there, just doctor and I. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. He followed us into the exam room. Doctor kept telling him to leave, and finally, after about 10 minutes, he stomped out, really, really angry. We proceeded with the exam and took the necessary pre-op photos of her unclothed body. Well, all of a sudden, he comes storming back into the exam room, swearing and screaming about us taking pictures of her tattoos. Now, she had a lot of them, and some of them were a little disturbing, and he insisted that we cover each of her individual tattoos with bandages and take new photos. And take new photos. She didn't say much except to begrudgingly agree, so that's what we did. Then when they were leaving, I overheard him asking Doctor if any of the first pictures remained on the camera and if the police could get copies of those photos somehow. We actually had to show him they were deleted. And then he said something about the police using tattoos to identify a body or something like that. I'm not sure exactly. They came back for the surgery the next week. There was no more weird drama, but yeah, I remember that case. I always will.
For a while, that satisfied him. At least long enough for the bruises to be hidden by clothing and the black eyes to be lightened with a lot of makeup. But it still wasn't enough. There was a new round of notebooks about the affair, and revenge plots kept his twisted little mind active for a while. He had placed a tiny camera in a little birdhouse. And he told me to lure my ex-lover to my office and seduce him. He instructed me exactly where to put the birdhouse camera and what position to have sex in so he could have photographic evidence of the other man's, I managed to put him off on that because that could only end badly. So instead, he had me find an artist who could draw, well, let's just say that those drawings were the only comic relief at the trial.
My name is Ilsa. I am a professional artist. I do portraits and still lifes with pen or ink in my studio. I've been a professional artist for over 40 years. I have had some strange requests before, but this one. When the police detective brought me the pair of sketches all rolled up, he said he wanted to show me something and to see if it was my work. I said I'd done a lot of drawings, I couldn't remember every one, but always I signed my work, so it should be easy. When he unrolled the drawings, I immediately recognized them as mine, and I remembered why I didn't sign them. They were two drawings of, in German we say Schwanz. One was eine kleine Schwanz, and the other was ein viel Großschwanz. I remember clearly when she called me and asked me about doing these two sketches. I said, not with live models, nein, no. I use live models for faces and whole nudes sometimes, but not this. She said it would be only from a verbal description. I still said no. It sounded so verrucht. I mean, crazy. But she was so serious. And she said it might be the only thing to to save her marriage or her life. She was almost crying on the phone. So I said yes. Then, when he came with her to the studio and demanded to sit right next to her and me while I drew, I said, no, I won't work that way. He backed down and sat across the room, but still, he strained to see and hear everything. I could tell which of the two, he wanted me to believe was his. But my suspicion is Unsicherheit, or how you say in English, insecurity.
But it wasn't enough. He still hurt so badly. His new plan. I had to sacrifice 3 things as penance for my sins. Just 3 things. A foot, my face, and a finger. That's all. Every day, for weeks, hundreds of times a day, over and over and over and over, you owe me 3 things. Until one day he said to me, stand right there. I did. Don't move. I didn't. He beat my foot with a hammer until the tears streamed down, but no cries came out. I wouldn't let them. You still owe me too. Day after day after day. You still owe me too. And then he tells me, stand right there. I did. Don't move. I didn't. He pressed a red-hot metal spatula against my cheek until the sizzling flesh stunk and the salty tears burned the seeping wound, but still no cries came out because I wouldn't let them. The next day, nothing but the words, you still owe me 1. And the next, and the next, and the next, until finally one Jack and Coke filled night, I couldn't take it anymore, so I told him, you stand right there. He did. Don't move. He didn't. Then I went into the kitchen, and with my right hand, I picked up the biggest, sharpest knife I could find. His knife.
My name is Elaine. I was the prosecutor in the case. In my 20 years in the DA's office, I have spent most of my time in the domestic violence unit. Well, most prosecutors, they hate the assignment. Well, you do have this overwhelming caseload with a lot of uncooperative victims. Cops and judges who really don't give a shit most of the time anyway. I mean, hell, they hate the case as much as most prosecutors do. A lot of people have wondered why. Why have I stuck it out in TV for so long? I mean, was it personal to me? Or maybe I had some sort of experience? I had a job to do, and I did it for all the victims that nobody else cares about. Now, this case was pretty extreme, but it was also really typical as well. I mean, first you have this grooming of the victim, showering them with praise and affection and love, and then exerting power and control. You have gaslighting, sexual violence, keeping them off balance and uncertain, always feeling vulnerable, isolating them, from their friends and their family so that they have nowhere else to turn. And like most cases, there were other victims. Oh, we did find Sandra, the girl that Brianna had told investigators about, and she was still alive. Oh, but she was living with a new name and in a new place. For this case, we had lots and lots of evidence, which we presented to the jury in this systematic, overwhelming, and quite frankly, boring fashion. But, oh, there has never been a more dramatic moment in all of my trials than when she, at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, told the jury in gory and vivid detail exactly what happened in the kitchen with the knife. There was dead silence for what seemed like minutes. And the judge adjourned the trial for the day. And those jurors, oh, they had all weekend to keep that story and that image in their minds. Oh, but the coup de grace comes when we presented the youngest daughter, Belinda's diary. It had been written years before, when she was only 9 years old.
Dear Diary, this is Belinda again. Today is not a good day. My dad is really mad, and my mom has a lot of bruises from my dad kicking and hitting her. I was so scared, I could not even eat. It made my stomach hurt. It hurts right now. He said if he catches her lying to him again, he will do stuff to her that she can't imagine. My dad got a big kitchen knife and knocked her down. He said, "You know what I use this for?" She says, "For meat?" And he goes, "I'll show you what I use it for," and almost stabbed her. Right now, my mom has bruises on her butt, her thighs, her stomach, and her arms. I'm really scared, God. Please do not let her lie to him again. They're in their room right now. I know something bad is going to happen, God. Can you help them stop the fight? When they fight, I start to shake and I can't write. I'm so scared, I don't even want to go to bed. Right now it's quiet, but last night, it was so loud, I could not sleep all night. Right now, I'm watching the sunset. It's pretty. It looks like the sun is sitting on top of the ocean. I think it's beautiful. I can't find Pooh Bear. I put him on my bed, but he isn't there now. I love Pooh Bear. I wish he was here. My stomach hurts again. I'm scared, God. Really, really, really scared.
So I told him, "You stand right there." He did. "Don't you move." he didn't. Then I went into the kitchen, and with my right hand I picked up the biggest, sharpest knife I could find. His knife. And I placed my left hand on the table. I brought the blade down as fast and hard as I could. Well, after the first blow, it was still hanging there by a piece of skin or muscle, so I brought it down again. He came running into the kitchen, and I screamed at him, "There's your finger, motherfucker! Now what the hell are you gonna do to me now?" And I cried. I cried. Out loud. At last. Well, he panicked for a few moments, and then his warped little mind went to work. He had me call 911 while he set up a cutting board on the table with a big knife and a pineapple. He didn't want to be there when the ambulance came, so he instructed me to tell them not to take me to Natividad, or to take me. He instructed them to take me to Natividad instead of SVMH, which was closer. But you see, I'd been to Salinas Valley Memorial with other traumatic injuries, and he was afraid that they might suspect him of hurting me or something. He took off in his truck, and when the ambulance didn't arrive after about half an hour, he came back, called 911 to find out where they were.
My name is Sue. I'm a paramedic. My partner and I got the call that night to an address way out in the sticks in Upper Carmel Valley. It was a total cluster. First, they sent the wrong ambulance to the wrong address, and then they called us and we had to figure out where it was. When we finally got there, she had a bloody towel wrapped around her hand. She seemed really calm. I thought maybe she was in shock. Her severed finger was on a kitchen counter next to a cutting board. He was there, acting all frantic. He said he had just arrived a few seconds before we did, and he said something about an accident cutting up a pineapple. He was very insistent on pointing it out to us in this real dramatic way, the knife and the pineapple and the finger and the blood. It seemed really unusual to completely sever a finger that way. It is not easy to cut off a finger. But in this job, you see just about everything. We wrapped up the finger in ice and said we were taking her to the nearest hospital, Salinas Valley Memorial. He was very, very insistent that we take her to Natividad, about 10 minutes farther. We didn't want to, but he kept screaming at us that he didn't like SVMH, so we got the clearance and took her there. He followed along in his car. When we got to the ER, he was all bossy and crazy. I was just really happy when we got out of there. The detective later asked me if we noticed anything else about her that night, like other injuries or a badly burned face. To be honest, I don't remember anything like that. It was crazy enough with the finger and the blood, which is what we were there for anyway. And with him acting the fool like he did. What an asshole.
The ER doctor wanted to try and have the finger reattached. He said we would have to go to a hospital in San Francisco 2 hours away to have a chance. But of course, he didn't want to drive that far, so I gave in. No, after all, he would probably cut it off himself after it was reattached for what I did to him. For a while, things were good. But he was so proud of me. I had proven my love to him. But it couldn't last, not with him. And so, it continued. Until July 29th, 2007. We were coming home from a shopping trip in which he berated me for not telling a total stranger in the grocery store that I was a whore. So, he threatened, or promised, that he would freshen up my black eye when we got home. So after 5 attempts, including attempts with my car, with a knife, with pills, even once with handcuffs and my gun, we finally made our escape with the help of 2 angels.
My name is Cynthia. I'm deputy sheriff. I met her and him one evening when my boyfriend Mac, he's also a deputy, when Mac and I were heading back home from Arroyo Seco. We had a long, hot day tubing with our collective 5 kids. I was driving the Suburban, everyone else was asleep. We were on a curvy, hilly 2-lane road when I saw a vehicle swerving all over both lanes coming toward us. It stopped suddenly, partly blocking our lane. I slammed on the brakes, which woke up Mac. We saw 2 people wrestling over the keys in the car. Then the woman jumped out of the driver's seat and started walking real fast back toward town. We didn't have our guns or badges, and our kids were with us. We thought about not getting involved, but it looked serious. So I ran after her while Mac talked to the guy who was starting to follow her. She was kind of babbling about not being able to take it anymore, showing me a terrible neck tattoo she said he gave her. And the guy just kept telling her real calmly to get back in the car. He told Mac she was just drunk and crazy and he would take her home to sober up. Finally, the little girl who had been hanging on to her mother's arm the whole time, she ran up to Mac, grabbed his pant leg and said,
Don't make us go home with him.
I'm a mom, you know? We told them to squeeze into our car, and we took them to the Soledad Police Department so she could make a police report and get this guy arrested. The next time I saw him was when I was working transportation. I actually drove him from the jail to the courthouse for his trial. I'll never forget that little girl, hanging on to Mac as if her life depended on it. Literally.
I tried to make a report about the violence, but the Soledad police said it happened in the county and not the city. And the sheriff's deputy they brought in to make the report didn't help. She said I was uncooperative. I don't know. Maybe I was. But she obviously didn't give a damn. She gave me the number for a women's shelter and left. After I was turned away at the shelter, because I left the violence without my ID, they actually suggested that I go back home and get it. And when I told them that if I went home, I was sure he was going to kill me, the nice volunteer call taker lady said, "You can't get in without your ID." There was a shift change at the police station, and the officer told me I would have to leave. Where should we go? I asked. And he pointed to a church across the street, and after a lot of begging, the father managed to get us a motel room in town for the night. A nice young officer drove us to the motel, and he said he would drive by during the night to make sure we were okay, and he gave me his phone number. Neither of us slept a wink that night. And the next day, the police and the clerks helped us find a series of safe houses to keep him away from us. I called every day to try and make a report, but nobody seemed to want to listen. Finally, it came down to another concerned citizen.
My name is Maria. I am from El Salvador, but my husband Danny and I, we live in San Jose. He is a mechanic. He is a good mechanic and has good business, and lots of customers became his friends. I never met most of these people, but Danny says they are his friends. I remember Danny came home one night and said something crazy had happened at his shop. He said a regular customer came by and showed him pictures on phone of a woman, the man's wife, with scars on her face, a cut-off finger, and tattoos of bad words on her neck. He remembered that woman was always very nice, not crazy, and he had not seen her in a very long time. Regular customer too, and always got car service there. Danny asked me, what should he do? Back in El Salvador, we don't trust police, but here we do know one policeman whose family was from our town. I told Danny, you better call him if you think something bad happened to the woman. So he called. I'm glad he called. He did a good thing. Danny is a good man.
So a police lieutenant from San Jose called a lieutenant in Monterey County, and eventually they took a report from me over the phone. A few months later, I talked in person to an investigator who didn't seem to believe me as he interviewed me for over 4 hours. Figured it was just more of the same. And then a few days later, the detective called me and said they found him at his new girlfriend's house in Fresno and arrested him. While he was in jail awaiting trial, they found tons of evidence all over the state. Guns, money, photos of my drawings and my writings, pictures of me, thousands of things. They found he had put a GPS tracker on the car I was driving. They even arrested his new girlfriend for trying to smuggle a gun into him at the county jail. My old gun. A .357 Magnum I once tried to shoot him with.
My name is Sylvia. I met the guy at an online chat room that was for, well, just call it a chat room. After flirting online a little, we found out we lived in the same town, so we met up. He was kind of cute. He kept telling me how beautiful I was. I wasn't sure he was serious. I mean, I had a few extra pounds, you know. But he said he liked women with curves. And he was so nice to me. I told him I was just coming off a real bad relationship with a real asshole, and I wasn't sure I trusted men right now. He was coming off a painful breakup too. He told me all about his insane, violent, drunken wife who had just up and left him, and she was keeping their kids from him. He was so proud of his girls. He called them daddy's girls, and he always got tears when he talked about how he missed them so much. And she used to call him all the time. I mean, he told me she called him. I could only hear his side of the conversation. She physically threatened him on the phone. He would be so upset. He was always real nice to me. Gave me my first tattoos. See, he had a real successful tattoo parlor business before, and we were going to start another one. He just seemed like a really sweet guy. He told me he loved me right after we started seeing each other. So when the SWAT team came and arrested him in my garage, I was as shocked as anyone. I mean, he was always real nice to me in the few weeks we went out before he got arrested. And he never hit me. Ever. And he called me all the time from jail, and he wrote me letters. I'm sure you heard about them supposedly finding me with her gun at the jail. Well, I took a plea, and I did my time. That's all I have to say about that.
Finally, Elaine tried him. The trial lasted for 3 weeks, and I was on the witness stand for 3 whole days. My girls and 20 others testified for the prosecution. The defense had a BDSM expert, you know, bondage, domination, sadism, masochism, to try and testify that sometimes people enjoyed having the shit knocked out of them just for kicks. Because you see, he had staged some photos of me tied up. Yep, they trotted out those photos. Oh, and they had him as a witness because, of course, he just had to testify on his own behalf against his attorney's advice. Now, he wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but I'd heard how he told the jurors that I was drunk and crazy, and I made him do all those things to him, and how much he loved me, and he couldn't understand why I was doing this to him. He even cried for them. And he looked pretty proud of himself until later that afternoon when Elaine cross-examined him. Later, I was told that his attorneys had to drag him into the courtroom the next day, almost in real tears, to continue the cross-exam. After that, the case went to the jury. I waited around the courthouse for 4 days. What the hell was the holdup?
My name is Rosalinda, but they just knew me as juror number 10. I still don't understand what the problem was. I mean, I listened to the same thing everyone else did, but, you know, I just didn't like her from the start. I thought she was lying. I didn't trust her, and he looked nice. He smiled at me. As soon as we started deliberating, so many of the other jurors were so sure he was guilty, they didn't even want to go over all 25 charges one by one. They just wanted to vote guilty on everything. I mean, he was probably facing a long time in jail. But he looked nice, and I didn't trust her. So finally, we went over all of the charges and the evidence and took a vote, and it was usually 10-2 or 11-1 for convicting him, and I was always the one. They tried to convince me with what they said were facts and testimony and evidence, but I just said how I feel. I couldn't help how I felt. I didn't like her. On the 3rd day of arguing, I asked one of the other jurors if she thought it was all right if I go visit him in jail to hear his side without the DA hounding him. The judge called me into his office the next day with just the DA, the inspector, him, and his lawyer. They found some old police reports which said I claimed my ex-husband had beaten me up. I said he never beat me up, and if the cop wrote that, then he was lying. Told him I had fallen down the stairs. Then they showed me some more old reports where the cops lied about me. The judge sent me out of his office for a few minutes and then called me back in and said my services were no longer needed. Be fine. I don't care. I know I was right. I didn't like her from the start. Maybe I can go visit him now.
After replacing one juror, deliberations began again. They found him guilty of all 25 felony counts. 2 months later, at the sentencing hearing, the judge locked him up for 48 to life. He'll be eligible for parole when he's 85. The judge said that even though the judge, wouldn't be alive, he wanted it on the record that my ex should never, ever get out. The judge called him the most dangerous, malignant, narcissistic sociopath he had ever encountered in 30 years on the bench. Wow. How did I get so lucky? If I can ever stop looking over my shoulder before that possible parole date, I am sure I'll start looking all over again if he is ever freed. Those certain tattoos are gone now, but the scars, the physical and the mental ones, they remain, but they lighten little by little. Having the tattoos lasered off was way more physically painful than having them put on, but it was a good pain. It's been 12 years since we escaped from him, but I'm still trying to escape myself as I was with him, and I'm trying to find my real self, the self I was before and the self I long to be again. My name is...
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is. My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
My name is.
Well, that's a long story. But you can call me Annie.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We've opened the doors out there, so hopefully it'll cool off. If you can put up with my hot air for just a minute. But I do want to tell you something that I couldn't quite figure out how to put in the play, but I figured it out now. So what Annie's been doing in the last 12 years, a year after the trial, she kind of did nothing and just sort of vegetated, and like she lived with her daughters, and like she